Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to meet you all. Today is May 17th, and we have some great guests and some great attendees as well watching this great show. So today we have Rachel Willoughby and Elliot Richmond. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Nice to have you. We're gonna start some. We already started some great discussion. So I think we will just continue more. I will also say hello to our people who are watching us today and who are actually going to be talking to us and exchanging thoughts and ideas. And let's hit it. So today's topic is marketing versus development. As we said, I mean, I don't want to actually start immediately. So I would just like to ask you, Rachel and Elliot, if you guys can introduce to us, who are you, where are you from, what do you do? And then let's move to our questions that we have. Thank you very much.
Okay, because I'm the bossy one. So Elliot and I have got a relationship, a partnership. We've got a business that's been going for 20 years now. And I set Square One up 20 years ago. It was originally a graphic design company, moved into web because that's where Elliot's passion became. But my passion is just business in general, because I've now got 4 businesses. And the marketing side of it is what excites me about the businesses. So I guess I'm the marketing person of Square One, and that's marketing for that business, but also helping if we have clients that are business owners, for instance. I've discovered that business owners absolutely know Scooby-Doo about marketing. So I will be holding their hand in that respect with the marketing side of stuff. Over to you, Elliot.
Yeah, so my name's Elliot Richmond. I'm a web developer for Square One Software and life partner with Rachel. Although we're on 2 different screens, we're actually in the same house. I'm just in the office, the expensive office in the garden. So yeah, we met at an agency many moons ago, decades ago. And yeah, I got into web development around about late 90s when it all kind of kicked off. So I'm self-taught, but I've been doing it for that many years, really. So yeah, and I do all the cooking. Don't know, Rachel.
All the hard work, I would say. I think Elliot does all the hard work. If Rachel, right, this is the perception. So talking about, our today's topic is actually we're talking about the benefit for the client. So when we're talking about different perceptions of marketing and development when it comes to developing sites for clients. Before we start with the questions, I had a statement before when I said that a designer doesn't have to be a developer, but the developer has to be a designer and an aesthetic part of this as well. He needs to understand the aesthetic and the value for the client. Would you agree with this, Elliot? And how do you see a developer from this creative perspective?
I kind of agree, and I would kind of disagree a little bit, because I think there are some developers that are super smart, very, very clever at what they do, and wouldn't necessarily have that creative mind. Whereas you do get some developers that can kind of cross both spectrums. And especially if you're a front-end developer, yes, you need to know about design. So development itself crosses, it crosses different sort of areas of the whole web business, I guess. So yeah, I would agree that it helps to know a little bit about design and user experience as a developer. But sometimes, if I'm designing something to have a good user experience, I can do it and I spend a lot of time on it, but I really want to spend time on development, and I'd be really tempted just to go, look, I know a really good designer. Look, can you just look at this? Give me something to work with, and then I'll just build it. So, and that again, it depends really on how busy I am. So yeah, does that answer the question or inspire the conversation?
Yes, totally, because it's very, what do you think, Rachel? Do developers, do they have this sense for aesthetics and for design?
Whether they do or not, it depends. As Elliot says, it depends on the ability of the developer. I think personally that a designer stroke developer has to understand what the website, it's all right, very well going, I want a website. We have clients that just say, I want a website. But if the developer and the designer doesn't understand what that website's supposed to do, then the design isn't going to work, if that makes sense. So from my point of view, yes, they need to know about design. They don't necessarily need to have a graphic design, but they need to understand how it works, and they need to understand the user journey. Both a designer and a developer, I believe, need to understand that to a degree.
All right. I also have a question, like, please also, if you have questions, you might just unmute yourself and you can ask the guests as well. In the meantime, before you prepare your questions, we've set couple of questions that we would like to also answer. So my question to Elliot would be, like, how does developers see the content? What's the perception of content from the developer's point of view? I mean, when it comes to...
Well, most of the time it's not provided. It's always a struggle sometimes to just get, you get an entrepreneur that'll say, I want this, I want this super whizzy thing for under 16-year-olds, and I want them to sign up, and I want them to be authenticated by the parents, blah, blah, blah. You go, okay, great, love the concept. Have you got any copy? And they'll go, well, no, just put something together. So you Greek everything in, and actually it's a bane of, a designer's and developer's life. So going back to that whole, you're having a discovery conversation with a client initially, that may well involve a copywriter to come in and help them with their content, because sometimes they've got the idea, but they just haven't thought it through fully. So that, in that sense of the content, getting it from the client, let's say they do have content and they have lots of it and stuff like that, you can generally figure out from the content what the client's trying to get across in terms of the user journey, and then essentially that might have to knock into SEO. So they may have written the content, or somebody's written the content, but it doesn't actually align itself very well with SEO. So you may have to restructure the content a little bit slightly, or get a copywriter on board who essentially knows a little bit about SEO, or knows a lot about SEO, preferably. So yeah, it may be a fluid thing that has to change.
Can I just interject here? As I do. Content is a marketing. It's a marketeer's job to provide content. The content has got to attract the user in, and it's got to solve a problem. So the very first thing, this is why I actually kind of believe that developers/designers need to understand the premise of what is basically inbound marketing, which is what websites are. So inbound marketing, and there's some people nodding here. I don't know whether I'm teaching people to suck eggs or not, but it's all about attracting, converting people. So your content has got to do that. So it kind of depends, how much a developer understands. A developer has to just understand those basic premises. So in order to be able to ask the questions, and a design, who is it for? Who's, the content isn't just the words either. We've got to remember it's video, it's audio, it's all sorts of stuff. But it's really important. And I see this so much that people, business owners, they don't really consider the content, as Elliot says, at the end when the website has been built. And actually what you need to do is have the content should be the very, very first thing that is considered before any design is done, before any development is done. It's the content, and it's the content based on who are you trying to attract to this audience. And that will then have a whole knock-on effect on the design. So for instance, if you were trying to attract builders in, you would like to have a website that's pink and got, it's just that basic sort of, I know it's a very stereotype kind of example, and there might be some builders out there that are attracted to pink, but it's that kind of thing, without knowing very first who your ideal client is, what you're solving. To me, that's the absolute basic that everybody in the project needs to understand.
Correct. And here Nicola is saying clients primarily look at design and text is secondary, right? So how about, how do you guys, now talking about getting the content, what's the best way to get the content from the client? Is there a tip?
You've got to ask questions from them in order to literally pull it out of them, and then draft it up. I mean, I'm not particularly a copywriter, but I will draft something up, because then when people actually see it, they can.
That's when they say, "I don't like that."
You don't like what?
That's when they say, "Oh, that's great, but I don't like it," and then rewrite it. But at least it prompts them to do something. Yeah.
Veronica is also adding content is what draws the user, and design and web development contributes to the user experience and determines how much time the user will spend on the site. Is there a magic formula to keep the user to spend more time on the site? Marketing perception and development perception. What's the parameters that you actually hold when you want to make a decision as such?
Well, from the marketing point of view, the site needs to be clear. So if you go onto a website and there is all these different things to press and buttons, etc., and you're confusing, a confused does not buy, full stop. So if you don't know what they're supposed to do or where they're supposed to go, that to me is a no-no, and people disappear. What about you, Elliot?
Yeah, so like it's already been said, the user experience can generally be figured out through the content. But in some cases, you might have to take something away because sometimes there'll be too much content and there'll be too much busy stuff to go on. It's at that point you then need to identify what's the primary goal. Some clients will come to us and say, I want everything on the homepage, and they must do this, they must do that, and they've got to get to the here and blah, blah, blah. And the first thing I'll say is that, well, can we just strip that back a bit, because there's only so much you can get above the fold. There's not on mobile. You've got a different experience. You've got less real estate to play with in terms of the design and the user experience. So you need to first identify, and again, have this conversation, identify what the primary goal is. What are they trying to do? Are they trying to raise a profile? Are they trying to sell a product? Are they trying to get signed up into a newsletter or get onto a mailing list? Is it a funnel page to do something else? So again, all of that would come from the content, but more importantly, or primarily, would come from conversations that you would have to identify exactly what it is that they're trying to achieve in first, primary goal, and then secondary goal, and maybe a tertiary goal. And, they need to be prioritized in that way.
So yeah,
and that's when you kind of identify, identify other parts so your primary goal will lead to your secondary goal. So it's not necessary to put your secondary goal at the forefront before the primary goal. That makes sense.
So I think that rather than the content coming first, what actually comes first is the marketing goal. What is it that you want to achieve from this website? And what's the first thing? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? So it's that first, and then the content comes, because it's how you write the content to make sure it's talking to your ideal client. So yeah, marketing goal. What's the point? And then business owners come to us and go, just want a website, because they think they have to have a website because it's a tool, it's a marketing tool, but isn't necessarily what they actually do need at that particular point. But and they haven't thought it through. They don't really know what they're going to put on the website or what it's actually going to do. They just want a website. So I think that's the first thing, is what is your marketing goal? And are your clients even on, the internet in that respect? Because they might not be much younger or much older or whatever. That might not be where they're searching for. It might be social media that's actually more appropriate for them. So I think the first conversation that you need to have, and then we can go on to the content, etc.
As Nicola would say, it would end up being structured, right? Structured content. Nicola, you're also a developer. How do you see as a developer actually the content? I mean, do you like to do the structuring yourself, or you like everything for someone else to do the structuring and just give you how the content should flow?
Hi guys. If I have a copywriter on team, or if client provides it, then yeah, I will go with that rather than to make up my own stuff. I might give some suggestions based on my experience, but I most like to be provided with both designs and content.
And in case you're not provided with relevant content, what do you do?
Lorem ipsum.
So I don't know what we would do without this Latin. Okay, without Latin, the web couldn't live at all. There wouldn't be words. And James, you also said here, if you do site before content, some clients never send content. So what's the mystery about it?
For me, when I used to create websites, so much. I'm from a small town, and so much people used to come to me for websites, and it's like, I think you mentioned, Maya, sometimes I think I need a website, so I'll just ring my local web designer and talk to them and tell them I need a website. But the conversation will probably end there, because it will never go forward, because they'll never really get serious about providing you with a plan or the content they want for the website. So in many cases, I won't say wasting your time, but you're trying to explain to them that a lot of this is on you. You know, what do I know about building? What do I know about engineering or your beauty salon? So
Yeah, I've got a tip for you there, though. So this is what you do: 50% deposit before you do anything, and then once they've paid money, they're a little bit more inclined to give you some content, because you can't. And you say, right, it's production time. Pay deposit, give me content, and then I'll progress. So when they go, well, why haven't you done my site? You can point them to the production timetable and go, because you didn't give me any content.
yeah.
Once they've paid money, I just think it's money, isn't it? But if you've not paid anything, and I've so many developers, usually one-man band developers don't actually charge, right? They don't take a deposit, and it's down the line, and you know how long websites can take. They can take months, mainly because you don't get the content.
Yeah.
So we've sussed that one out, that we get money from them, and they're keener to give you the content.
Yeah,
it's still
I think I learned the hard way. You know. But anyway,
I think we all do. We all have.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure everybody has a list of such projects, but I also wanted to ask you, sometimes, I mean, if we talk about freelancers, there is, I mean, in general, companies actually call people that they rely on, they know, they have some type of trust, a neighbor or whatever, and we're talking like small businesses. And then everybody goes directly to the developer. Nobody goes to the content writer first, or a marketing person, or whatever, you know, but everybody goes actually to the last phase of the website building, which is development. And so how do we improve this? Is this part of the future education to small and medium enterprises, that they should first find a marketing person or a business development person who will organize this for them? What would be your suggestion?
For me personally, in an ideal world, that would be fantastic, but it's not an ideal. So I think what you're going to have to do is, if a developer could give added value by knowing the questions to ask the client at the beginning to get that content going, or, you know, or to write it themselves. But yeah, we would all love to have content writers, designers, but at the end of the day, people's budgets aren't necessarily there, and they do just say, I want a website, and they haven't thought about all the stages. So if, as a developer, you can understand a little bit about the marketing, you know, what questions to ask, who is it for, what's it supposed, just very basic ones, who's it for, what's it supposed to do, etc., then you can lead the client a certain way, or, you know, for a certain, can move the project on a little bit. But yeah, well, wouldn't we love to just have every aspect of it all? You know, but we don't have, well, some people have very big agencies that do it all, but unfortunately, it's not the real world, in my opinion.
Elliot, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's so varied. You could be a one-man band, that you're providing a service to somebody who, you know, has got an idea, and they come to you and they think that you can do it all. The key thing is to be transparent and say, look, I do this job, I'm a front-end developer, or I work with a back-end developer, or I can do this and I can do that, I can do copyright. This is what I provide. Again, it depends on what their budget is. You know, they may think that they need a fantastic website to sell that will get a minimum viable product on the market, and have a fancy website that's probably going to, you know, it needs a user registration, it needs all the ordering system, and there might be something off the shelf. Find out what their budget is and say, yeah, we can build this from scratch if you want it that way, but you're going to have to get, you know, user experience designers or UX designers, testers. You're going to have to get content writers. And as soon as you start being transparent about that, and the price, the budget starts to go up, they can see then that, oh, actually, okay, well, I can only afford X amount. I say, well, maybe you just need to take something off the shelf that's ready to plug and go. It allows you to get your product off the market, to do your own ideas, or, you know, we can talk about where you want to take this, what's the purpose of it, what you're trying to promote. Is it your business? Is it your brand? Is it your product? Is it a widget? Is it a service? And then take it from there. And then at least you've got everything on the table. They can look at a budget, they can decide what they want to do, and get off on that way. And then again, it's about having conversations, and you don't just leave them in the lurch like that. You give them as much advice as you can for what suits their needs. I mean, we're in a lucky position because we work with larger companies that have got big internal sort of engines. If it's not an agency, they've got a marketing department within their business. So we're lucky from that perspective. But yeah, going back a few years, we definitely had a lot of the one-man bands, and it's just weighing up that kind of budget, what's affordable to them and what gives them the best value. But yeah, it's about having those conversations and being honest with people. You can take it all on and you can try and do it all yourself, and not be transparent that you can maybe outsource this to a copywriter to help you write content, but you're just going to become a busy bee. And I've seen it so many times with not just developers or designers, but consultants who think that they can provide the whole service. They kind of advertise themselves as a web agency, but actually they're just a consultant that can put things together, and they don't actually use copywriters or UX designers. They just literally take a template off the shelf. And that's where I have a problem. I don't think, if you're going to do that, you need to be honest and tell them that you're going to do that, because again, it gets people in, like I said, I've seen it so many times, it gets people into hot water at the end of the day. It gets them stressed out. They get a client that is going to be so demanding. You said I could do this. I want to change this. I want a better user experience. And they're going like, well, I can't actually do that because it's a rigid template theme or something from WordPress. And I'm starting to get out of my depth, and it causes stress for them. And it's just, who wants that? Just be honest and find out what the budget is and say, this is what you can have for your budget. If it's a big budget, great. If it's not so much.
Awesome. Nicola made a comment saying, from his experience, clients often don't think about backend functionalities. Designs is what sells the websites to clients. So, Nicola, if you want, you might want to further this topic, or maybe James would like to comment and give his view.
Well, I was talking about from my experience as a freelancer when I try and sell my services as a web developer to potential clients. First of all, I'm not a designer, but when I try to get a new client, it's only if I have good designs, or if I have something to present from design point of view, the clients might be interested. If I just tell them, look, you could have this functionality, you could have this integration, it would be easier this way for you to edit content or to create new pages, they never consider that. It's like, cool, it's nice feature, but let me see how it looks on the front end.
So, Nicola, is you need to make that into a benefit rather than a feature, because you can do this, that, and the other. You need to flip it over to the benefits of them having that, having the capability of having email subscriptions, etc., and what that can do for their business. So again, it's coming back to marketing. Isn't it great, marketing?
Yeah, but usually clients aren't that technologically educated.
They're not marketing. They're not marketing savvy in the first place.
Yeah,
probably,
yeah, and they just want a nice looking presentation, basically.
So that brings us again to a point where a developer actually has to have the sense of design, right? In order, if a freelancer, then some design component is a must in surviving, because otherwise you wouldn't get noticed. So I have a question actually for Rachel now. And then Emma asked the question, how much are your clients thinking about integration with social media? Let's answer this first. What's your experience with clients wishing to connect to social?
Do you want, okay, so our particular clients don't really need to be, they're not really needing to be on social status and what they already do. But when I work with small business owners, You have some that just think, I've got Facebook, I don't need a website. And have to point out that Facebook then owns all their content, and anything can happen to Facebook and it can go down. Or they've got a website and then they go, I want to have my Facebook feed on there, which is like, why? Because then you're taking people away from your website. You're taking them into a different thing. So social media integration works, but it's a tricky balance. I think Elliot will probably have more to say about that. But sometimes I would say to a client, actually focus more on your Instagram or on Facebook or whatever, rather than trying to meld the two together. And certainly having a Facebook feed on your website to take people away. It seems that people, just focus on in that case, but you should be using social media, driving it to your website, not having a website and driving them away to social media, in my opinion.
Interesting. Any other views?
Yeah, I think for me, marketing and social media, they kind of play hand in hand. They do have their roles, but things like Facebook, I don't really use Facebook. Well, I don't have an account, but I know a lot of people do, and they start businesses on Facebook, and they have some success. But for me, I think that your website should be your hub. So you're pulling people from, if you're posting out to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and you're pulling people back to your website where your products are or your services are, what you're trying to sell. So it plays a hand in the whole kind of marketing wheel, in that sense, if that was the point of integration. If you're talking about technical integration, like, okay, I want my Twitter feed on my homepage, or I want my Facebook feed, I really don't understand the point of driving anybody to your social page from your main website hub. I think in terms of things like Instagram, they're very specifically, very visually based. And there are things that you can cherry pick from there, like to raise your profile, like using live videos and stuff like that, and image-based products. But you're essentially bringing people back to your site to buy from your site, whether it's a product or service. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Very.
I may add
Please.
regarding integration as a widget. It tends to be hard on the page load of the website. So if you have like a Facebook feed or Twitter feed or Instagram feed or whatever, it tends to load additional JavaScript files, and it will ruin your SEO score.
Yeah, I think that is, for me, I think
agree.
that is always a consideration. The amount of feeds as well. Some websites seem to have Facebook and Twitter, even Instagram as well. I think it does work well for if you're, for example, a football club where you have lots of kids who are logging in on social media to check the scores or fixtures. I think in that case, it might make sense to kind of have a link to your social media, or even a small feed. People will probably like a page and get updates when they're on their phone, whereas normally they're not on it. They don't. So I think it works.
Yeah, it makes sense to have that on specific pages, but never on the home page.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a social profile, in the whole marketing scheme. And yeah, James is absolutely right. For certain businesses, like getting updates of scores and things like that, where it's reactive updates, where you might get a reaction and then you can open up a conversation. So your profile is quite important in terms of being on those social platforms. But yeah, when it comes to the technological side of things, I think the pros and cons, the cons outweigh, the pros for having something on your website that is driven by social media. Use a website for what it is. It's HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Use it for that. And then if you want to share that stuff on your social feeds, then yeah, do it that way, I think.
I think also from a marketing point of view, it's important to find out where your clients are on the social media. I've seen so many people do everything. They're on Instagram, on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on LinkedIn. They're wearing themselves out, and their customers aren't even there. it depends, you know, you've really got to identify who your customer is. I keep harping back to this, that who are you selling to and where are they going to be? So that's, you know, just wanted to point out the social media. So someone asked the question, do you think social media is taking over the need for business to have a website? I think it's dangerous if you allow that to happen, because as we said, like, you don't own, you know, Facebook. I think there was a couple of months ago, was it, when Facebook went down for, literally went down for 3 or 4 hours, but the panic of business, because that was where all their stuff was, and they were having an event and a live, this, that and the other, and it was just like, that's quite scary that there's so much control. You're handing over the control to an outlet like that. So hopefully it wouldn't, social media isn't taking over the need, but I think they work hand in hand.
I think recently there was a story in Australia where there was something about getting the news rights to publish news items, basically, and the politicians said, you know, they weren't going to agree to Facebook's or Mark Zuckerberg's proposal. So Facebook, they stopped newsletters, I think, using Facebook in Australia for a few days, and just having that control and losing that ownership of content is quite dangerous, I think. So I think parliaments around the world need to look at legislation and take away the actual control that some social platforms have. You know, it's all in the news at the moment about all sorts of things because of the pandemic, you know, the rise of Black Lives Matter and things like that, and social media platforms not playing their role in how they should be conducting themselves. So there is a danger if you rely on services like that and they own your content, they could pull that away from you at any point. And I think that's quite scary. Always like to consider, if it's your content, you should own it. And it should, you know, if you can have that on a website, some website services don't allow you to do that with things like WordPress or, you know, bespoke built things with Laravel or whatever. You own that content. So, well, as long as you've got the hosting and you've got access to that data.
Awesome. There is another thing also. I mean, what I notice as a marketeer in this whole business is that different type of communication is communicated on social media, and it's a totally different approach. And then website is a totally different story. So I think that many businesses have mixed set of targets, especially nowadays, because especially when you look at the groups and holdings, like companies that have like groups of like 10, 15 different companies, and then you have to put them under one social page or one website. It's much clearer to do it under a website than create a social page that has a group and then explain each post. So I think it's a different perspective. But also, now that we talk about websites, clients, and business, I have a question for all of you, but first I would like Rachel, if she can say, and that's like, how do you see the role of a developer in the optimization and conversion process?
You see, you just, I can't believe you asked me that, because I know I am technically inept. I don't even know what those words mean, really.
No, in creating sales.
Conversion to sales. Oh yeah, I think it's vital that in conversion sales, and you're taking them around the journey to convert them to doing what you want to do, i.e. in this instance, sales. So a conversation has to be had between the developer and the marketer, as we said, about what those goals are. And the developer needs to be able to understand that journey for the conversion. The marketer, there's definitely a conversation there. So optimizing the site, you know, just simple things like sites that don't load quickly enough. Well, it doesn't matter how great your content is, how fantastic your website looks like. We've all got bits of goldfish now, so if that site doesn't load in 4 seconds or so, you've gone. So just things like that, obviously a developer needs to be aware of, and I'd be surprised if they weren't aware of that. But that's a marketing aspect as well. It has a massive effect on a sale conversion of sales, like the journey does as well. Now I'm going to let Elliot finish answering that one.
Yeah, but I have an additional question, which is, when you go and visit websites, what's your perception of websites? Are you looking instantly in a code, or for instance, you are supposed to make a website as per Rachel's request, and let's say this website is supposed to be in tech industry. Would you go and visit like competitive websites and see their logic behind and understanding how they make money? And then how do you set this business perception in your head in order to create something new and great for the client that will make money?
Again, I think it comes from the client, what their goal is, and that whole marketing strategy. It's easy to say, right, okay, I want the next MI5 site, but actually the client probably doesn't need that. You can go to it and look at it, and 9 times out of 10, actually, a client will come to you and say, look, I like the look of these sites. Can you build me something like that? And you say, well, what are you trying to achieve? You go back to that question. What is your goal? So you don't need a site like that. And they're looking at sites because they've got lots of movement and they think it looks all fancy. And the first thing you say is that with anything like that, you're going to put your users off. So you may potentially lose a sale. So the first thing I would be recommending or trying to sort of sway them, the decision for them to make, is to say, look, what can we take away? What can we remove from this and make it as simple as possible to achieve your primary goal? And that might just be, so if I look at something and I like the look of a site, it's usually because aesthetically it's clean, tidy, and it's easy to use. That's the most important thing. It's easy to use, and I understand it absolutely, what I have to do, what it means. This is a product. I'm encouraged to press this button, and then I get into the whole sales pitch or whatever it is, the sales funnel. And that could be a product or a service, but yeah, it's important to sort of illustrate that to a client and say, look, you've given me this, it's got all bells and whistles, but I don't think you necessarily need that, because you're trying to achieve this, which is just to sell a product or a service or to get people to sign up. So you don't need all that. We can simplify all that, make it look clean. We can optimize it so it's super fast to load. It has a great experience on mobile, and you're going to get all of those benefits, and let's roll with that and see what happens. And I guarantee that you'll get to the numbers you want in a shorter period of time than you would having to go through this time intensive journey of trying to get something that you like the look of, that you think you need, but actually it was a waste of time. We can just eliminate all that and just do something that's highly optimized and it serves your purpose, which is your primary goal.
Nice. If anyone has any comment, if not, we can move to some other questions. All right. So I wanted to ask Rachel and Elliot the same question, which is, who dictates the website development? Is it marketing, or it's client, or it's development?
I'm going to say marketing, obviously. It starts from marketing, I think, personally, because otherwise you've got no idea. If you don't know what you're marketing or who you're marketing it to, then where you just pluck a website design out of thin air. It starts from the marketing and who you're marketing it to and who you're trying to attract to, in my opinion. But Elliot might have a different opinion.
Can you just remind me those 3 points again? No, Maya, you said that what defines, is it the marketing? Is it the
marketing? Is it the client? Or it's the development? I mean, in order to make the successful story where a client is happy and has paid all his dues, to who dictates the design of the website in the end?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's the marketing, but without the client, you can't have a marketing idea. So it's kind of what comes first. You need the client to have the idea, to formulate the marketing, and then all of that. I think probably the development comes last, to be honest. You look at all of those things and you decide, okay, well, we can develop it in such a way. And again, if you break it down, client might have an idea to roll out. They want to roll everything out, and you might suggest to them, okay, well, this isn't going to work for your marketing budget. So maybe you want to roll this out in phases, you know, and then break it down. And again, that's going to define the way that you develop something. But one thing I would say is it's important to know what the full story is going to be, regardless of what phase you're at. You need to know what's coming in phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, because those phases will ultimately change depending on the success of the previous phase. And again, that will define how you develop something. But, you know, you go full circuit, it all comes back to the marketing idea, or what ideas the client has. And again, when you go through the next phase, they may come back with, they may have another idea based on the success of the first phase. Their whole product, they may have pivoted their business, so the phase is going to change. But again, they would have pivoted based on a marketing decision. You know, they may see a product that's selling really well, so they want to exploit that product or that service. So their marketing would change. But again, it would be the marketing that defines, the client defines the marketing defines the development, I guess. I don't know if anybody else has a different conflicting opinion on that, but.
Let's see. Conflicting opinions, please come forward.
I guess it only works if the client actually knows anything about marketing, though, which in my experience is quite often not the case. They just, you know, marketing is a scary thing to them. They don't really understand it. They just, you know, think of just having a website is marketing. So I would always go back and question them, what is it you want to achieve? Who are you? And the number of people that say everybody, or anybody who's got a dog, or anybody, you know, and it's too broad. I'm constantly saying to them, I niche it down, because it's not everybody. And eventually, after a conversation, you get down to, actually, no, I don't sell it to everybody. I just sell it to, you know, mainly women, and they're mainly of this age, and it's this, that, and the other. And that's why marketing helps, because once you've niched down, it makes your marketing so much easier to do across the board, not just websites, but everything.
It's very interesting how marketing actually is a business development tool for small and medium enterprises, because I'm sure that they learn so much about themselves when they actually meet you guys, and when you start asking different. So I'm just, you know, I would really like anytime when there is a new client that business development section is also added, because this is actually what you do for them. One quick question, Rachel, can a developer count the right number of hours which he's going to be spending on a project? Yes, no. Elliot, don't say anything.
It depends if his name is Elliot Richmond, because developers seem to go into
That
this.
goes for any developer.
Yeah, they go into this kind of surreal world where time no longer exists. And they say, they quote, you know, Elliot will quote me, because we always do a scope. We scope everything out, and that's vital to do, because the moment you've all, I'm sure, aware of and experienced scope creep. So if you actually list absolutely everything out in the scope, the moment somebody deters from that, you go, whoa, X amount. But in the initial stages, Elliot will give me a ballpark, oh, that'll take me 3 days. I triple that. Because I don't know, Elliot's 3 days, 72 hours in a day. Because when I get his time, they are nothing like what he had. So I don't know what happens to you guys. You go into some kind of parallel world where time just goes on. I don't know. So, in the long-worded way.
My standard contingency on this kind of thing is 50%. Whatever they tell me, 50% longer it's going to take. You know, because of everything you've discussed. Sorry, I just jumped in.
No, please go in. Elliot, tell us. Nicola, tell us. James, why this happens?
For me, when I'm making websites, sometimes or developing plugins, sometimes you just enjoy what you're doing as well, and you want to just keep improving it. For me, it's different, because I would have been doing projects for set prices, so I'd have no problem anyway. I know what I'm getting, but I probably just want to keep working on things because I like programming and I like developing. So it's different for everyone. But for me, even on a weekend, my friends might be watching Netflix. I'm making websites or creating plugins. So time just goes super fast as well. But it sounds like it's different with Elliot when he's working on it per hour.
Well, we always quote that set fee, because I think from a point of view, you know, nobody wants to have this massive bill that they're, you know, not expecting. So you have to quote a price. And sometimes we're able to get away with, you know, between 2.5, 4, you know, a ballpark. But more often than not, a client wants to know the price, which is why we write a scope out. So for that price, this includes this, this, and this is how we'll do it. But yeah, so that's why I literally triple Elliot's ballpark figure. So then we might end up being, you know, round about the right figure, because I can't suddenly say to the client, well, actually, I know he said it was going to take him 75 hours, but it took him 220. So therefore, I'm charging you 225 hours. Like, you wouldn't have a business. So you've got to, you know, you've just got to bite the bullet, and I just got to hit Elliot with a large stick every now and then and tell him to get more accurate with pricing.
Elliot, say, James, say.
I was just going to say, thank God it's you doing the pricing then, Rachel. Can you imagine it was Elliot?
Believe me, James, he is no longer allowed. The moment a client says, how much would that be? He has to say, I'll get back to you on that. Because he's not allowed to give a price.
It's taken me a long time to learn that.
Years to learn that. But,
Rachel,
yeah,
you're so spot on.
So Elliot, tell us why you're not able to calculate a couple of hours. What happens?
I think you just look at the project, you look at what's required, and then you scope it out. I'm in a good habit now of absolutely scoping everything out, but line by line, and saying, you know, I need to create a function to do something else, or I need to structure the database to store data in a certain way. I need to cherry pick certain bits of data. So you're constantly not refactoring, but your thought process is changing. And sometimes that happens when you're actually developing something. You said, I've done this before. Actually, there's a better way to do this. I don't need to, you know, there's a expression in coding, programming called dry, which is don't repeat yourself. And it's so easy just to copy and paste code. And as soon as you start copying and pasting code to do something on a different page, you're not being very good to yourself later on down the line. So you have to come back, refactor that, and say, how can I do that in a quicker and easier way to make my life easier, you know, in 6 weeks' time. And again, that happens on a daily basis. I'd say, you know, if I look at code I wrote yesterday, sometimes I'm just banging it out because I need to get something done quickly and I want to go back and refactor it. And it may be a plugin that you've already created or developed once, and you think, well, actually I need to bung something in there so I can hook into it and use that functionality, but without breaking the plugin. So, and also when you're deep in code, and some code bases I've got are, you know, tens of thousands of lines long with multiple different functions, some that are being used or deprecated, and yet you're constantly kind of rewriting stuff. So yeah, it's easy to get lost in the weeds, I think, when you're like looking at your own code. And also when you're, say, you're cherry picking something from somebody else, you know, if it's a plugin that you need to hook into, there's a lot of digging around to see how something works before you can actually create something that you said, you know, was in the original scope. So yeah, it is a difficult one, and you do get lost in time because you, like James said, you know, there's a lot of stuff you enjoy. Sometimes if I don't have to code something, I'll be coding something anyway. I'll just be building something because I want to build it. I mean, I hate to say it, but that sometimes happens when I should be working. You know, actually, I don't want to work. I want to do this. I want to code this thing. But you know, it doesn't happen often. But you know, I had those thoughts definitely cross my mind on a daily basis. I don't want to be doing this work I get paid for. I want to be building this.
Interesting. And before, I mean, time is passing, right? So we're talking already for some time. My last question to you, we'll see if our dear friends have some more questions for you, would be for all of you, except for Rachel, because Rachel is not a developer, is like unique code or a template? What's your preference?
For me, it's unique code, I would say, in my preference. Although having said that, you know, if there's a template out there that does the job quickly, and you know, that's cool and fine. But I think for me, unique code is going to help me, you know, later on down the line in a few weeks, 6 weeks time. But then if the project manager is saying, look, I don't care about that. I just need to get this job done and I need to get it paid and I want to get it out. Just use the template, then I'll go, yeah, okay. But just be aware that if we get into issues later on down the line, or you've bought into a product, the worst thing I see is, and I don't know no disrespect to any developer out there or anybody that does this, consultants, is they'll buy a license or something just to get the job done. They install it, they run it, they give it to the client, they launch it. The client, the communication or the relationship breaks down, and they don't pay their license the next year. And then the client has based their business, built this business using this specific thing, and it breaks, and then their business just stops working. So there's always that danger. So if ever that happens, we'd always recommend, say, well, you can use this off-the-shelf thing that is a template, or it's a subscription-based thing, but please just go and buy your own license. So you're registered with it and you get all the updates, and then we'll just run with it. You know, there may be a situation where it might not do what you want it to do, or it does much more than you ever want it to do, but you're paying a lot for it. You know, that's what you want to do, fine, because you need to get it launched. That's cool, but it may be more cost effective to have something built unique that does specifically what you want it to do, and it's going to just see you, it's going to have more longevity. That's my view.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nicola mentioned custom code. So Nicola, is of your opinion?
Yeah, I always prefer to build my own. Well, I'm primarily a WordPress developer, and I always prefer building my own themes, custom themes for clients, rather than using pre-built or premium themes, since most of the theme developers that build themes for selling them or just publishing them tend to create catch-all themes, like to have as many possibilities as possible. And in the end, when user client only wants one feature out of tens or hundreds of possibilities, it tends to be basically the bloatware. So if you want to have an optimal website, it's always better to go with the custom code. And same with the plugins. Like there are awesome plugins with great functionalities, but what if you only need one functionality from specific plugin? Just build it yourself.
Nice. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if you build themes in particular, I'd agree. If you like to build themes in particular, you can build them in such a way that it's almost built like a framework. You know how to make small tweaks to apply it to different clients. So I love making my own ones, but I always do so if I know if someone asks me to make it a specific way, I'll go back to the one I kind of made that's kind of like bare bones, and I'll just adapt it. I know how it works. I don't have to get my head around a pre-purchased theme, and I find it quicker, and I just find it a lot better creating your own.
Emma, oh, sorry. What about you, Emma? Do you have an opinion on this?
Well, I'm not a developer.
Oh.
I'm in Rachel's side of this conversation, and I agree with absolutely everything she said. She's so spot on. Like, your experience is my experience. But yeah, I mean, if a developer is able to, build custom, and my client is able to own those assets, and we can make those considerations about what is going to happen about 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. I'm saying to a client, invest this amount of money, and they say to me, how much is a website? Not that I build websites or I'm involved in them. I'm social, but sometimes I get brought into these conversations, and I say to them, well, how much would you rent a retail store for 5 years? Just try and take that number. And if you're not going to have a retail store, let's think about how much you should be investing in a website. So if it's custom, that always to me is the preferable thing. If obviously budgets are limited, then off the shelf, but there's, so many limitations. So yeah.
Nice.
I would also add that I think it's really important that the transparency that if the developer has the capability of building custom code or is going to be using templates, and there's no problem with that, but to be upfront, because I have met developers that actually, I've done, I can actually upload a theme and add content. I've done it for a couple of my businesses, but I'm not calling myself a web developer. So I've created a website, but I'm not a web developer. So I think it's really important that there's transparency there, because that will affect, if I'm going to be employing somebody who is a web creator, then it will affect the market that I suggest to clients, because I'm not sure whether that template that they're going to just pluck off the shelf is going to be able to do all the things that I've been talking to the client about. If I know, however, there is a developer that can build anything from the ground up, then you will, your oyster, providing that's got the budget. But it's the transparency that drives me crazy. And I am staggered that there is no there's no entity that protects consumers on webs. You can have the most appalling web developer do a job and create absolute havoc, and there's no comeback. There's no off-gen or anything like that. There's no body, a governing body that you can go to, or that you can be a part of and say, I'm a bona fide web developer. I think there's a huge gap there that needs to be addressed, because we've seen some shocking, and we've seen things where people have paid £8,000 and it's a £150 template. And also
that's more than that, actually. I think going back a few years, there was a I think it was an NHS site, and somebody paid, it was in the region of like 40 grand, yeah, and it was literally just an off-the-shelf theme. It was like, what?
Well, that was a good deal, let me tell you.
Yeah, somebody made some good bucks out of that.
That's a very good mathematics. Okay, it's really awesome. So I think we touched a number of interesting topics, and first of all, I think we all met. Thank you, Emma, James, Nicola, Kim, Elliot, Rachel, everyone. I'm sure it would be nice, Elliot, if you can share perhaps a Twitter handle or something for you and Rachel, how we could actually reach you and follow you in future. So this was a really great meetup. Thank you very much for joining this meetup. I hope you will also be able to join us next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about creating of niche content with Davinder, the founder of WP News Weekly. So I hope you will enjoy as well. I hope you actually enjoyed our session today. This is the official part, the end of the official recording part. We will still hang out a little bit and talk a little bit more, but this is the end for all the online viewers. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you.